I'm Tim Donnelly, the Trump Republican in this race. I was Tea Party before Tea Party was cool. Well, hell, I was Tea Party before there was a Tea Party. I was one of the Minuteman leaders here in the state of California fighting to secure our border. I believe in one God from whom all our rights derive, and one nation under God, God who made heaven and earth, but only two genders. God is the solution to our problems, not government. You guys see that the left, the far left, is trying to undo the 2016 election. President Trump needs some backup, and I intend to go there and help him drain that swamp. I believe in the Second Amendment. And I love my 45s, both my Springfield 1911 and my president, Donald J. Trump. The question of this election is not whether or not we're going to send a Republican or a Democrat. The question of this election is whether we're going to send a deep stater or a swamp drainer. And you said I could finish the last line, right? I want your support to go to Washington, D.C. to drain that swamp. God bless you and Godspeed.
Plus or minus. Good evening, fellow Patriots. It's an honor to be with you. Most of you know me. I have spoken before this group at least a dozen times in the last 5 years that I've represented you in the legislature. One thing that you might not know about me, though, is that like our president, I'm a business owner. 30 years ago, I started a business out of my dorm room at Caltech, and like our president, I built that business into a successful business. And I believe our president is successful at what he does because of those business skills, and I want to bring those skills to Washington, D.C. And let me tell you this, I am the Trump candidate in this race. And why do I say that? Because I was asked by the Trump campaign in 2016 to be a Trump delegate. And I went to the Republican National Convention. You might know this, but our California delegation was the delegation that was key at stopping the effort to deny Trump the nomination in 2016. As a result of that advocacy, I was invited by Donald Trump to be present at his inauguration, so I took my kids and my wife to Washington. That was an honor. And I've been out to D.C. meeting at the White House with the administration at least half a dozen times since then. I am passionate about going to Washington and supporting our president. I have the endorsement of the California Republican Party. I have the endorsement of the California Impact Republicans. I have the endorsement of the California Republican Assembly, and I would very much appreciate your endorsement and your support tonight. It has been an honor for me to represent you in the California State Assembly. I'm the ranking Republican in budget in the legislature. I also am unusually successful. I have passed more legislation in the last 5 years than any other Republican in Sacramento, and that includes major legislation like the bills that I wrote with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association that agency said was the most substantial taxpayer protection bills written in the last 5 years. So with your help, we're going to go to Washington, D.C. and continue that legacy of success.
Andrew Breitbart said that we are in a long war for the soul of America. Do you agree or disagree? How are we doing in that war? 9 seconds.
Well, I absolutely agree with Andrew Breitbart. I used to write for Breitbart. Look, what's at stake is not Republican, Democrat. It's whether or not we're going to have a country. What the future of freedom is at stake, and even deeper than that is the heart and soul of the greatest country on the face of the earth. I love this country. And I believe that we can take back our freedom and our God-given natural rights right here, right now, in this election. Are you with me? Okay, you gotta say something. But we gotta send people who are gonna ask the right questions. And as I said earlier, government is not the answer, government's the problem. We need a spiritual revival. We need to get Americans on their knees for this country, because we are one half step away from socialism, which would snuff out the last best hope of mankind. God bless you and Godspeed.
So we are definitely at the vanguard of the battle for the soul of America. And if you want proof, look at the democratic socialism that happened just here in California just in the last few years. This is what the future looks like for the rest of California if we don't act. We have the highest income tax of any state, the highest sales tax of any state, now thanks to SB 1, the highest gas tax of every state, and yet we have the worst government services. We have the worst poverty of any state, the worst homelessness of every state. Our schools are 46th in reading, 47th in math. Our roads are 49th out of 50th. Okay, so we have the highest tax and the worst government, and that is what's in store for the rest of the country if we don't act. We need to return to the principles that our country was founded on, and that is limited government and personal freedom.
This is for Tim Donnelly. You know, I've known you for a really, really long time, and we've been friends for a long time. You both come from Michigan. So my question to you is, where have you been for the last 2 years? Because I don't see you out in the community. I don't see you participating. My husband and I do a coalition on homelessness and drug addiction, how it's related. You don't attend those meetings. And I was wondering why, all of a sudden, 2 years later, you're showing up right for a seat. You don't have seen for the last 2 years. Also, feedback on that as well is that I don't believe in negative races, and you're already running a negative race against your colleague right here. And do you not respect Ronald Reagan's 11 commandments?
Okay, do I get 90 seconds for each question?
Sure. Sure.
Power's in charge here, I guess.
Okay, where have I been? I've been working. I ran for this seat a year ago, 2018. Yeah, I didn't win. But I stood up and I fought. And I've been to every single corner of this district. And you all know me. You guys have seen me at this Tea Party. I came to this Tea Party before I was ever elected to anything. So, and what was the other question? Oh, why am I running a negative campaign? Well, I'm not.
On your Facebook, you're criticizing Jay Obernolte and positions, and I just think...
I've never said a word about Jay Obernolte on my Facebook page. Please read it to me. Look, there's a big difference between a negative campaign where you smear someone's character and a campaign where you expose someone's record. And I think that should be crystal clear here in this election.
Good. Further on the question, do you have any comments, Jay?
So I do believe in Reagan's 11th commandment. And let me tell you something about this district. We say this is the safest Republican district in California, but let me tell you, this is only the safest Republican district in California. We currently in the 8th Congressional District only have a 4.5 point registration advantage. Okay? So if the Democratic Party wanted, through Act Blue, to funnel $8 or $10 million into this seat, they could take this seat. This is not a safe Republican seat. So we can't waste time and energy fighting amongst ourselves. And that's why I'm pledging to run a clean campaign in this race. I think we need to talk about issues, we need to talk about positions, and then whoever gets through the primary is going to have to face probably Chris Bubser, the Democratic candidate, who already has raised, by the way, over $300,000 through Act Blue, coming from other places in the country trying to turn this district blue. But with your help, we're going to keep it red.
We have another audience question. Step up. This will go first to Jay.
Hi. Well, I might be the only Hispanic Republican here. I hope not. Anybody else out there? Okay, all right, right on. Oh, power to the people. Yes, I am. Absolutely 100%.
Let's go to the question, please.
You know, when Ronald Reagan was president, he dared to call Russia, and I forget, kind of because I'm jittery, but the axis of evil. And I want to suggest that the Democrats are the very same, because they're allowing creatures to come into our country to undermine. We see them undermining President Trump and our way of life. There used to be I'm getting to the question. There used to be a website that talked about the dark side of illegal immigration. It's no longer there. And it talked about the diseases that they bring, okay? They bring cholera because there's no sanitation, diphtheria, and now our children have to be in a...
So we're kind of going two questions here, and okay, we get one. Pick your choice. You want to ask about illegal immigration, or you want to ask about whether the Democrat Party is evil? Okay, question is, do you believe the Democrat Party, not necessarily rank and file Democrats, but people like Pelosi et al. Are evil?
So do I believe the Democratic Party is evil? No, I do not, but they are deeply, deeply misguided. And they will take our country in a direction that will destroy us as a society if something is not done. And I want to talk about the other question that you asked here, just because I've got a few seconds left. I support our president's views on immigration. Our president is not anti-immigrant, but he says that we should, as a country, be able to enforce some border security, and we ought to be able to put some minimum limitations on who we allow in here. Do you know that just last week, the federal courts overturned his effort to simply require that an immigrant coming here could prove they could pay for their own health care? That's a very reasonable thing for us as a country to say, and unfortunately the court system has hijacked that issue, so I completely agree with you.
Tim. Is the Democrat Party evil?
Yes. They are the axis of evil. Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, they're trying to steal the 2016 election. You know, President Trump is the only one who's fighting there, but he needs reinforcements, and you know that. And you know what? Look, I hear a lot of happy talk about how we shouldn't have more than one candidate in the race. I just have to say something. Does anyone here remember how many candidates President Trump faced in the primary? Was it 2? Was it 4? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. 16? And the Democrats still lost. This is the most conservative district in the state of California. We are never going to lose this district to a Democrat. I'm just going to tell you that right here, right now. Whichever one of us gets in that race with the Democrat is going to be the next congressman. You can take that to the bank. They're not going to spend a penny here. They can't cheat their way to victory in the 8th Congressional District. There's too many patriots, there's too many people who don't trust the government and are not going to hand over their ballot to a bunch of ballot harvesters. So this is the one place where you can choose by your conscience.
Next.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'd like to know how you stand on mandated vaccinations.
Jim, you're up first.
How do I stand on mandated vaccinations? Well, I vaccinated my kids. How many of you vaccinated your kids? Sure. But see, I made that decision as a free American because when I vaccinated my kids, the doctors gave me a handout and said, you know, there's some risks. And I read the handout, and then I made a decision. I made a decision to vaccinate my kids. The Democrats came along and took the freedom of choice away. That's a violation of your First Amendment rights right there. So starting with AB 2109, I fought that. I held a rally with Rob Schneider on the steps of the Capitol, and we got Jerry Brown to at least save some glimmer of free choice and parents' rights. And it's all about the government coercion. It's not about vaccinations. Once again, I am not anti-vax, but I am pro-freedom, and I am pro-choice when it comes to who is going to make the decisions for their kids. Parents have the right to make that decision, not the government.
Okay.
So I'm very, very strongly in support of a parent's right to choose whether or not to vaccinate their children. In fact, I was one of the leaders of the effort to overturn the anti-vaccination bill that was required this year and the one last year that initiated that requirement to send your kids to school. And what I explained when I spoke on the floor of the assembly is that every parent should have all of the information that they need to make an informed choice about whether or not to vaccinate. And I don't think that that's being done right now. I think that parents are being sold a bill of goods. I don't think that vaccine companies should be immune from being held accountable for the side effects that their vaccines cause. Right now there is a fund and there's a maximum amount of money that you can get in damages if you have a child that's damaged by a vaccine. And I'll tell you, I had a woman in my district office last year in tears because she sent her teenage daughter in for a PAP vaccine, and her teenage daughter the next day could not walk, spent 6 months learning to walk again. And she was limited by this state law and the damages that she could pursue. And so her point was this. Her point is not that vaccines are bad, but that parents should have the information that they need to make an informed decision and the freedom to decide for their own family what's appropriate.
Doug.
I'm going to channel one of my favorite Tea Party members, Ms. Ashley, and she makes what I think is an excellent point, that we Republicans need to rally around a couple of key issues where all our candidates across all different seats that they're running for unite behind a few key issues and can hammer those points home. If you could name one, two, or three issues, let's really keep it limited, don't be influenced by my shirt, that you think could unite all Republicans and be a message that will get across, even across party lines, to carry us to victory, what would those issues be?
So I would keep it simple, and here are my three issues. First of all, limited government. Thomas Jefferson said, that government is best which governs least. And that holds more true today than it did when he signed the Declaration of Independence. Second is more personal freedom. Because if you look back throughout all of human history, the societies that have generated the most prosperity for their members are the ones that promote those personal freedoms. And the third that I would say is personal responsibility. And I think that's what we have forgotten the most here in the People's Republic of California, is that we all should be responsible for our actions, right? And that comes part and parcel with freedom. We can't have freedom without personal responsibility. And unfortunately, we have forgotten that in California, and we are forgetting that across the United States of America.
Jim.
I kind of agree with him for once. But something that I'm excited about, and yeah, it is on your t-shirt, but I went to an event, is school choice. And the reason I'm excited about it, because it's a positive thing, it will undo the grip that the teachers union has on our kids and their future. And the future of California, the future of America are our youth, and they're being brainwashed in the indoctrination centers that used to be called schools. So that's one. You know, another one where I think a lot of people can come together is freedom of speech. You know, the First Amendment is not just about freedom of speech. It's about the right to worship as you see fit. Religious liberty is under assault as never before. How many of you here have put up a Facebook post and had yourself shut down by Facebook and sent to Facebook jail? Okay, well, you guys got to work on being a little more radical, because that wasn't a very... But they control the digital public square. So they shouldn't be censoring people. And I understand they're a private company, but you know what? We need to investigate what is going on at Facebook when they're only censoring conservatives, because that's political speech.
I'm going to interject because you talked about school choice. Jay, do you support school choice as in every parent gets their child's share of government spending on the schools into their child's educational savings account?
You guys get
Yes, but you stated your support.
Yeah, I support it.
Jay.
Absolutely. In fact, for the last 5 years, I have been one of the leaders of the support for charter schools and for school choice in the legislature. And it comes out of a deep, meaningful experience that I've had as a parent. We did not like what the schools were going to do to our kids. And so my wife and I homeschooled our children, both of them, all the way through high school. And that gave us a lot of insight into both the destructive effects that the school system has on our children and the difficulties that a working family has in educating their own kids. And that was a choice that I am very happy we were able to make, but I'm blessed that we're in a position that we were able to do that. Many families can't. Our charter school system is a model for the entire country in the right way to implement that kind of school choice, and yet the CTA and the Democratic establishment have spent the last 12 months destroying our charter school system. And some of the bills that were passed this year have set our charter school system back 10 years. So we need to start by reversing that, and then we also need to communicate as conservatives and as Republicans the fact that school choice is a fundamental part of our rights as parents.
We got to about over there. Tim, if you have anything you want to add on school choice, you're recognized for 30 seconds.
There's nothing more significant than being able to provide your child a better future than you had, better opportunity. And our schools are failing. We're in usually 49th in test scores, in results. And a big part of that, there's no competition. Competition breeds better results. So if you could go anywhere, then you would actually have the ability to determine your kid's future and use the money that you already paid in taxes. Okay.
Nelson.
I stand around, sit around, and I listen to people running for office. And I hear stories that has taken place 40 and 50 years. Our children didn't lose their education last year. They lost it 40 and 50 years ago. And I'm hearing the same stories today that we heard 40 or 50 years ago. I believe in the truth. If you read the Communist Manifesto, there's 45 articles. 44 of them have already been completed. Part of it is the schools. The rest of it is our freedoms. The 45th one was supposed to be Hillary becoming president in 2016. I would like to hear a definite, let's get the swamp clean and tell the people the truth. It's the Communist Democratic Party.
Comments? You're up first, Tim.
Absolutely. Look, we don't have a Republican and a Democrat Party anymore. We have Americans versus communists. That's the fight of our generation. And he's exactly right. You know, they didn't just use the schools. They already took over the entire education industrial complex. The grade schools, the middle schools, the high schools, and then colleges. They took over the entertainment industry. President Ronald Reagan was fighting them as governor of California in the SAG union. And do you remember in 1961 when President Ronald Reagan warned us that they would usher in socialism as a Trojan horse disguised as a right to free health care? He warned us, and now it's here. And the Republicans that we have in Washington, D.C., many of them are what President Reagan warned us about. They're the collaborators. They're the tax collector for the welfare state. They're not fighting. They're going along and they're getting along and they're making some really bad deals in our name. And it's time that we send a message to them. So send me, Tim Donnelly, to Congress to kick over some tables. Thank you.
Jay.
So listen, folks, we are involved in an existential fight for our liberties and freedoms as Americans. And it is nothing less than that. If you look at the last time in our country that we had this level of social turmoil, it was the end of the 1960s and the Vietnam War. And we are already at that level now. And I fear it's going to get worse in the years to come. And we are the evangels here in California because we know how bad progressive socialism gets. And by the way, I hate that word. I hate that word progressive. And I also, socialism, let's call it what it is, right? It's communism. It's the eroding of our personal liberties, it's the growth of the welfare state, and it's the growth of government's control over your lives. And so that is our job as your representatives in Washington, is to be your evangels and spread that message of just how destructive that kind of philosophy can be.
Rita.
By the way, I like the red ties. Regarding school choice, will proof of citizenship be required?
Oh my goodness. Here in the People's Republic of California, the question was, will citizenship be required when you choose a school? No, the Democrats here, their belief is that no one should even ask you about citizenship. In fact, as Vice Chair of Budget and the ranking Republican on budget this year, we fought against, this is really going to tick you off, you ready for this? The Democrats have put tens of millions of dollars into a pilot program to use your taxpayer money to fund legal services for illegal immigrants. Your taxpayer money is going to that. They started that pilot program last year. They expanded it again this year. That is what we're up against. They think that we should have completely open borders, and they think it should be illegal to even ask about your immigration status. And that's an indication of what's wrong in this state.
Right.
Tim.
That's a great question. And the answer is they're never going to allow school choice here in California. But it is a fight that I believe we can win. And when we do win it, we need to not allow anyone who is illegally present in the country to get any taxpayer-paid benefits, because that is a violation of federal law. And look, when they tried to give free college tuition to illegal aliens here in the state of California, I filed a referendum the next day. When that passed through, and I gathered 450,000 signatures over the next 3 months while many of my colleagues were off to Hawaii and jaunting around on lobbyist dimes. And my wife, who's standing in the back there, Rowena, was the only person to speak against the bill after 200 illegal aliens came through my committee on higher education and stuck their fists in the air and said, I'm unapologetic, I'm unafraid, and I'm undocumented. And they did the you know, Che Guevara, Black Power salute, whatever you want to call it. And what we did is we gathered almost enough signatures to stop them. Because we don't offer any of those benefits to our veterans or their families if they're transferred into the state of California through no fault of their own. So this is something that we absolutely have to stop, and I have led the charge for years on that issue.
Agnes, you guys are in trouble now.
We all know what's wrong in our government. What are you going to do specifically about illegal aliens in our country? What are you going to do specifically? What are you going to do when they get out of prison and let back into our communities? I want to know what the plan is, because I heard too many blah, blah, blahs and nothing is being done and nothing is being addressed. Thank you.
Well, absolutely. You know, this issue is near and dear to my heart. And I'll tell you what I've done. Long before I was ever elected, I led a group of Americans to the border to protest the federal government's failure to do its job. On national television, I built a wall in protest. We began laying the foundation for the election of President Donald J. Trump, who is the only one who has picked up the mantle and been willing to take all the slings and arrows and fight for it. What do we need to do? Number one, defund sanctuary cities. We need to arrest anyone who violates federal law, whether they're elected or not. And you know, if you're illegally in this country, you don't have a right to anything but a free ride back to your home country. Yay. You don't get a free ride on the back of the taxpayers. Woo. We need to repeal birthright citizenship. That's nuts. We need to build that wall. Say it. Build that wall. I will fight to get it funded, and I will fight to get it built. And you know what else? We need to make it easier for legal immigrants to get here from countries that don't hate America. Right. We need to let people in that have skills that we need, so that we actually put America first and the American people first. God bless you and Godspeed.
Dave.
Well, look, solving this problem starts with aggressive prosecution of anyone who commits a crime in this country who's an immigrant, legal or illegal. When you are here legally, even if you're here legally, you are on probation, right? We are saying to immigrants, yes, please come in, be a part of our society. But if you cannot adopt our rules of our society, then you have to go back to where you came from. And unfortunately, we've forgotten about that. So that's where it starts. But also, I think there's a deeper issue here, which is that we need to solve the problems that are causing people to want to come here illegally. So as an employer, I told you I've got 28 employees right now. If I hire an employee, all I'm required to do is to have them fill out this form called an I-9. And they have to give me proof that they're eligible to work here. But the proof that they can give me is just like a photocopied social security card that's easily forged. Employers are not incentivized to check the veracity of those documents. And we have a federal system, it's called E-Verify, that will allow employers to check that, but we don't require them to. Why not? That would completely stem the tide of illegal immigration if they could not get jobs once they came here. And I don't understand why we're not doing it. So I think that the heart of that problem starts there.
Anyone else here? Okay. Will you both categorically, 100%, no ifs, ands, or buts, pledge that you will not support a tax increase? And to be upfront, part of our concern, Jay, is we've heard from a number of sources that you were thinking about voting for the cap and trade tax. You didn't, but you were thinking about it. So, address both issues, cap and trade tax, and will you categorically 100% vote, pledge here, no tax increase?
Certainly, no tax increases. And wow, I had not heard that I was thinking about voting for cap and trade, because I'll tell you, when I voted against cap and trade, I was assistant Republican leader, and the entire caucus was being urged to vote for cap and trade by the Republican leader. So in voting against cap and trade, I risked not only my leadership position, but also the committees that I was on. And by the way, I lost one of my most important committees as a result of that vote. And afterwards, I was so upset about what the caucus had done that I led the effort to oust that Republican leader. And that Republican leader still probably be leader today if I hadn't led that effort. So I very much disagree with the way you've characterized that. Certainly, I have one of the most conservative voting records in the legislature. I'm endorsed by many of the top taxpayer organizations as being one of the most conservative voices for taxpayers in the legislature, and I would continue that in Congress.
Absolutely no new taxes. I will fight every tax increase. As a matter of fact, I fought against tax increases so hard that they put me on the Daily Show on late night comedy and put me under the lights and tried to break me, and I wouldn't ever raise taxes, especially to fund new spending for illegal aliens. But I would like to address the other issue that was brought up, because it is germane. And I got a phone call from somebody in the Republican caucus 2 years ago, former Assemblywoman or current Assemblywoman Melissa Melendez, who told me as a reporter, but didn't want to go on the record then, that you, Jay, were the architect, you were the godfather of the gas tax, you were the architect of the entire secret deal with Jerry Brown that included the suspension of the fire tax that you've been fighting for so many years. And I just want to know, I mean, I think it's a legitimate question to ask. Were you involved in any way in the negotiation with Jerry Brown to put that in there? Or are you going to say tonight that Melissa Melendez was lying?
So we're going out of order here. Can I rebut?
Absolutely.
All right. So
1 minute more each on this subject.
okay, so I'm known as the policy wonk in Sacramento, so quite often I'll be asked to write policies on issues. The only involvement that I had in cap and trade is that I was asked at the very beginning to write a set of Republican guidelines that should guide any negotiation that went on with the governor. And what we came up with was this: cap and trade is a market-based system for selling allowances for emissions. And that's good. We conservatives support free market solutions. But what's bad about it is it amounts to a huge tax increase on everything that we buy in California, particularly gasoline. So what we came up with was this. We said, cap and trade in itself is not such a bad thing, but we need to use all of the money that we get from that auction revenue, and we need to return it to the taxpayers who paid it. Right? So we could do that in terms of rebating the gas tax. We could do that in terms of incentive programs for manufacturers. We wrote all of this out. We gave it to the Democrats, and they wadded it up and threw it in the trash can. And so the bill that they drafted had none of that stuff in it. And at that point was the point that I said, okay, look, I'm out. So no, I was not the architect of the Democratic-led cap and trade bill.
Jim, you're recognized for 1 more minute. You're recognized for 1 more minute if you wish on the subject of cap and trade.
So you're saying that what Melissa Melendez told me and the characterizations that she made are false? Okay, well what she said was that Jay went and negotiated the deal, then came back to the caucus and encouraged the members to vote for it, and then voted against the deal that he had architected. That is what I was told by a member of your caucus, and she was furious. She was sent to the doghouse, and you got a leadership role under the new administration. True or false? Okay. All right. Well, we'll hear from Melissa Melendez on this, because I think this is an important thing, because if you had anything to do with that deal and you represented me during that time period, you didn't have my permission to do it, and I never heard anything about it. You didn't come back to us and say, hey, by the way, I'm getting involved in a deal to perpetuate a hoax like global warming.
I'm going to ask a follow-up on this. Jay, you just said that if they had rebated all of the cap and trade money, then, if I infer correctly, you would have been okay with that. Do I understand you correctly?
Yes.
Tim, would you vote for cap and trade even if all the money was going to be rebated to the taxpayers?
What are they doing with the money that they stole from us? They've diverted it to all kinds of other projects. It's become a slush fund. So I don't believe them. I don't trust them. I would never make deals with the devil. I consistently fought against them and exposed what they were doing every time, period. So Gavin Newsom was wondering about the mystery of how the gas tax got so high. Have you guys wondered about that? Because I sure have. And I've been waiting to get an answer on this, and I will get the other side of the story in the follow-up from Melissa Melendez, and I will let you know what she says.
That went a little bit longer. You have 30 seconds more if you have anything more to say on the subject.
So, for once, Tim and I are in complete agreement. This is the big problem with cap and trade, is that the Democrats take all of that money and they turn it into a giant piggy bank for anything that they want to spend that money on. And that is why gas tax is so high here in California. And it's a philosophy that they have. It's not just that they're taking the cap and trade money, but the gas tax revenue in itself gets diverted. And that's why it was such a travesty that the voters rejected Prop 6 last year, because I can tell you, as Vice Chair of Budget, oh, I'm sorry, did you say time or are you saying quiet?
Both. I said quiet.
Okay, because his says 30 seconds. All right.
He says time. Okay. We are past time thanks to my technical issues earlier in the meeting. I'm going to ask you one more question, then we're going to get you your closing statements. We in the Redlands Tea Party Patriots are looking for fearless warriors who, let me find my question. We are looking for reliable, fearless, indefatigable warriors for our cause of preserving America and our freedom. Why is that you?
Why is that me? Look, 5 years before I ever asked you for a vote, I stood up for this country. I never served in the military, but I served as a Minuteman leader. I went to the border. I got called all the names. I got attacked. I got death threats. And I fought for you. I stood for you. The reason I stood up on the question of illegal immigration is because it's an invasion of our country. Because we are fundamentally transforming our country through immigration. We are allowing the socialists and the communists to come in and take over and essentially replace us. So that is the fundamental question. And most people, especially Republicans that were elected at the time, didn't have the courage to fight. It was we the people that went out there, the Minutemen, and then the Tea Party. So I was a leader a long time before you supported me and you elected me. And I will be a leader anywhere you send me, because I am a hardcore American patriot who knows the Constitution, who will fight, fight, fight. I will go to Washington, D.C. and pick the fight we need to have to take back our country. Godspeed.
Great.
So when you say you want a conservative warrior, I hear you saying we want someone who's going to go get things done. Is that right? It does no good to stand on the Capitol steps and shake your fist and yell if nothing comes of that. So I say just compare the records here. I've told you that I've worked tirelessly over the last 5 years in the legislature. I've told you that I have passed more legislation than any other Republican in Sacramento. That comes from hard work. And that's how we get things done in government, is by proposing and passing legislation. We're able to do things even in this democratic state, like strengthen law enforcement. That's why I have the endorsement of all of the law enforcement agencies in San Bernardino County. The district attorney, Sheriff John McMahon has endorsed me, the county of Inyo has endorsed me, SEVA has endorsed me. That's why, because they know that I'm going to strengthen the rule of law in this country, and they know that I'm for taxpayer protections, and I'm going to get that done.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And we are past our allotted time here, so we're going to do a 90-second closing statement. Whatever else you'd like to tell us tonight.
You know,
Quiet. Quiet.
I always find it fascinating when people put down the accomplishments of others and then brag about what they've done. Because you know what? The proof is in the pudding. It's very simple. You're known by your enemies, not by all the unions that support you. And for me, the political establishment considers me a threat the way they consider Trump a threat. They're gathering around my opponent here because he's one of them. And it's deeply unfortunate because I don't want to be represented by somebody who I fear will sell us out. I will never sell you out. And I will guarantee you'll know how I vote and you'll know the deals I make because I'll put them on Facebook and have absolute transparency to the people because you're my boss, not the unions, not the political establishment people.
All right. Mr. Tim.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to use my 90 seconds to sling mud here. I want to tell you about why I'm passionate about going to Congress. I want to tell you about the tool that the Democratic Socialists are using to fuel their socialist agenda, and that is the federal budget deficit. And that's what I think is the most existential threat to our federal government. Do you know that the Congressional Budget Office says that by the year 2050, just debt service on our national debt is going to consume over 10% of our gross domestic product? Not 10% of the taxes we collect, but over 10% of everything that we do. And I think I'm uniquely qualified to help solve that problem because I've been the ranking Republican in budget here. When I was on city council, I chaired our budget committee all 4 years. And little known fact, I've been a graduate student here at California Baptist University. I'm just finishing up my doctorate in public administration. My dissertation is on public sector budgeting. I want to help our conservative president reduce that federal budget deficit and eliminate that debt so it's not a threat to our children and our children's children. And with your help, I'm going to go to Washington and I'm going to do that.
Thank you, Jay. That will conclude our forum here tonight. Thank you, gentlemen, and I'm sure they will answer any additional questions you may have.